Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I'm Dan Gay, the Chief Marketing Officer of BlockSearch Blockchain, and you've joined us with our Blockchain What's Next podcast. And I'm here today with Tim Vasco, the Chief Architect of BlockSearch Blockchain and the CEO and founder of BlockSearch Blockchain. Tim, how are you doing?
Hi, Dan. How are you today?
Great, great. Thanks for joining me. And I'm enthused to talk about the things that we're going to talk about today. And I'll just share with everyone the evolution of cryptographic companies and consensus, a mouthful.
Yeah, that's a tough one to say 3 times fast.
Yep, that what it is. We're going to talk about Libra and Facebook, and then the idea of centralizing the decentralized model, and then Singapore with the Asian gathering of over 57,000 people in just the marketplace in Asia in terms of fintech. And then also it's about psychology, not technology. So with that, Tim, let's talk a little bit about the evolution. I know you've got a lot to say about this subject.
Yeah, well, Dan, basically, I always like to bring people back to where the world's at today and the psychology of technology. I think it's important for us to really focus back on that. And what we're going to do is talk a bit about, Libra and what happened with Libra. Libra was a cryptocurrency, is a cryptocurrency project that Facebook's bringing out. And basically what they want to do is bring out money. And as you might imagine, with a user base like Facebook, where all of this traction they have in people using social media is up, it's of great concern to countries, entire countries. In fact, Germany was the first one to come out and said, no, we're not going to allow Facebook to have a money inside of it. Well, of course, when we see what happened with what Facebook was already doing with data, now they're going to have this very powerful thing, money. And as they look at that, these countries are saying, we're here to protect our borders, protect our citizens, protect our data. Things like GDPR, which is the European Data Protection Regulation. And we're not going to allow for this kind of blatant use of money by corporations that are now, in many cases, much bigger than countries. I remember when Facebook hit 1 billion users and 1 billion concurrent connections, meaning 1 billion people on it all at once. Think about that in terms of, say, the United States, where the United States is 200 or 300 million people, and Facebook is over 1 billion people. It's 5 times the size, and it just is too much power within a corporation.
Well, and Tim, when Facebook's Libra white paper came out, the first thing that came through my mind was trust. And as we both know, Facebook was hit with a fine of $5 billion by the FTC for violating consumer privacy laws. Now they have to update and adopt the new privacy and obviously to GDPR rules. And but is that an entity that you want to trust with your money? And it just goes to show. And even looking at the top stories today, The Guardian says how the wheels came off of Facebook Libra. Cointelegraph, nearly 75% of German consumers would reject it. And even Jamie Dimon saying it's a great idea, but it'll never fly. So,
well, Jamie Dimon said Bitcoin was a great idea and cryptocurrencies were tulips, and then Chase brought out a cryptocurrency. So let's talk a little bit about that. I think it goes back to our point that it's about psychology. The world's changed, right? And the Economist said countries better get ready for digital currencies. They better get ready to participate in that economy. So if you look truly at the idea of digital currency and the idea of blockchain driving a country and our future, which is what all these things are based on. They're all based on this idea of blockchain and this technology of blockchain. Then you can see things like what's actually happening is the Bank of Canada came out and said the Bank of Canada is going to have a government-backed digital currency, GBDC. So all these acronyms like GDPR, Government Data Protection Regulation in Europe, GBDC, government-backed digital currency. It's all evolving. Our mindset, our psychology is changing to start adopting this and bringing it in. So who is going to control that? And that's where we get into this idea of centralizing and decentralized business models.
Right.
So, and psychology again. So the other thing that Facebook did bring out, and it's a great case study to start watching how we as consumers are consuming and using our internet. It gives us an idea of what this idea of privacy means and who controls that data, and where governments want to control it and they're centralized, and companies want to control it and they're centralized. The big shift with blockchain and the big shift with what we can do today in our current compute capacity is give you, Dan, back your privacy and your private key.
Exactly.
In other words, I can say, Dan, you control your data and you decide what happens to it. You control the kind of money or value transfer you use, and you decide how you do that. That's called a private public key pair, and it's based on cryptography.
And
so
the good thing about that, Tim, is we're creating trust, but on both sides, both for the consumer and then also for the business, so that they can comply to all the rules and laws in Europe and the US and everywhere else, so that we can protect consumers.
Exactly. It's personalized economics. It's personalized purchasing. It's personalized and protected in a way that you can now start working with companies on your terms instead of them saying, hey, here's the terms. And we've all done it. We've all seen as we log in, and we're forced to do it if we want to use the software, here's our terms and conditions. This is our license agreement. And when we do that, we're signing what's called a shrink wrapper agreement. It's one size fits all. And here is how I'm going to offer all these free services to you. So classic example, Google. Google doesn't even know who you are initially, but they figure it out by the searches you do. They figure it out by asking you to log in. They figure it out by what's called remarketing and placing cookies on. Every time you click, oh, I want to use this website, I'm okay with that. Here's my cookie. And you're like, yeah, whatever. You click that. What they've just done is put a tracking mechanism on your machine and on all of your devices, whether it be mobile or desktop or what have you, and they're watching what you're looking at, and they're profiling you as maybe just a random entity. And as you get those clicks through, the idea that you're probably going to buy something or take some action and put your name in to some site, or how about this, Dan? Have you ever used Google or Facebook where it says, here, it's convenient, just log in with your Google or Facebook credentials?
Right.
Right? So now Facebook, you log in with Facebook or Google on some other site, they know that you're on that site. They know what software you're using, right? Because it's Dan Gay. You think, oh, that's convenient. I don't have to type my stuff anymore. And it is, frankly. You like convenience of the internet, don't you, Dan?
Absolutely. In the areas where I control and that I want that information.
Well,
for sure.
no. Yeah. You like it, and you didn't think about that until I told
none of us did.
Right? None of us did. That's the whole point. Right. None of us thought, oh, wait a minute. What am I really giving up? Okay? So these businesses, now, the cat's out of the bag. The magic box and black box has been opened to the world, and now governments are coming in and saying, no, you've got to handle data like this. No, we're not, Facebook, going to let you just bring in a money and take the underpinnings of this giant global social contract and make it go away. So the way I look at that, Dan, is I look at it as the difference between disruption and disregard. We have to regard that we do have social structures and financial structures in place, and the world's come a long way with that. Disruption means working within that regard and now creating a new model that is decentralized and permission-based and privacy-based. So think about this. What if I have a privacy policy that I say, here's how you can use my data, and I know you're using it? Well, and then I get my convenience of searches and things like that, but without being stalked on things I don't want to be stalked on. Maybe I do want to be stalked. I'm a sailor, but maybe I want to be stalked on what are the greatest sailing deals out, or what are great sailing destinations, or whatever, because that's kind of convenient. It's like, oh, cool, I didn't know that. It's that awareness over here. That's great. But maybe I want to go do some business research or some competitor research on a company or something like that, and I don't want to be stalked. So you've got private browsing tabs now, but all of that data is still going out there. And can I really trust that they're not using my data? Well, of course they are. Of course they're using their data. I'm not paying Google for anything that they do, and it's massively expensive to run these companies. They had to figure out a way in that version of the internet to monetize whatever they were giving away for, quote, free. Well, we found out free wasn't free.
Yep.
Right?
And Tim, I think it's important to just, if you could just share quickly, centralized versus decentralized and why that's so important, and especially in terms of all of the data breaches that have actually been happening, 100 times higher than over the last 5 years.
Well, that's the whole idea. Centralized means that when we come in to any organization's tools on the internet, on the cloud, we're actually putting our data in there, and they're controlling all that data in a centralized database. They have control of the database. So, for example, if you're a small business and you start doing your Shopify account and you upload all your products, and Shopify goes dark or shuts you down, or what happened in the cannabis industry in the United States is Visa stopped accepting credit cards. So instantly, even for CBD companies, so as soon as that happened, anybody who had a Shopify account could no longer transact business on a credit card in the United States. So it was back to cash. They still had their products up there, but think about that, cash on the internet. And there's no digital currency that they can use to go do their business, even if it's perfectly legal and approved in the state.
Right.
So when you have centralization, the main entity, the company that controls the data, that has the data, you've given it to them freely, whether you're a business, you know it, or you haven't, and that software controls everything. Decentralized means we flip that on its head. It's very disruptive. It's disruptive because now you control two things, Dan. Data in and of itself can be very complex, and it's organized in tables and structures and ways that you need software to actually use it as a typical end user. So when we give you the data and the software, now, as we do at BlockSearch, you have your data and you have your software. Now, we no longer have this idea that I can charge you or hold you hostage to a monthly fee, or hold all your data that I can use, that I can monetize it, right?
Correct. So it's not in one silo. To me, that's the key thing.
Actually, it can be in one silo, but you hold the silo.
Correct. So, but it's decentralized.
It's decentralized. So now what I do is I say, oh, this data is, even the data I put up there is cryptographically designed in a way that only I have the private key. Look, companies have been doing cryptography and security around this data as much as they can, especially now. It's about a $6 trillion industry because of all these data breaches, as you mentioned. But they've been doing cryptography for a lot of years. But who holds the private key? When was the last time you had to go into into a site and they say, enter your private key to unlock your data, Dan?
Right. Versus just a simple password that can be easily hacked.
Well, they give you a password. They give you sometimes an SMS text message or something and say, that's you, come in. Well, they're opening the door to you, and we're flipping that on the head. You're saying, oh, well, here's the rules I'll let you use my data with, or here's how I'm going to run my business. And if you want to earn my business, I'll let you in and come work with me until I don't want you anymore. Then I kick you out. Right. And frankly, a lot of these ideas are in the GDPR in Europe already, and they're not really enforced totally yet. But if they were, say a company like Amazon, and they violated something, the teeth are really, really severe. It's 4% of worldwide revenue. If Amazon got hit in Europe with a 4% of worldwide revenue penalty, that would be equal to 2 years of their operating profit. So, but it reminds me of when HIPAA came out, and in theory, in the early days, it was written to protect privacy data, Health Information and Privacy Protection Act.
Right.
But today, it's got all of these tools around it that say, no, really, you can't text. You have to have a HIPAA compliant portal for data and things like that. That's where we're at. And we're now moving into this new model. And how do we know this is so big? And that's that whole idea you brought up about where we're headed in just 3 weeks from now to the Singapore FinTech Festival.
Yeah, and before we get to that, Tim, I just want to state the one of my favorite sayings that you've stated, and it just really wraps this all up, is that we solve the issues that the internet created. And when you think about, sending passwords and just data breaches, et cetera, the blockchain and decentralization, it resolves many of those security risks and issues, and it brings true trust into the overall marketplace and for consumers as well.
Yeah, well, blockchain is now this next level of disruption, or actually retransforming all of these conveniences and things we're talking about. Right. Digital money, fast and rapid adoption of all these conveniences and transactions online. But because of blockchain, we can now start building structures that allow people to have some of the same conveniences you have when you're in the real world. And you decide which store to walk into. You decide whether or not you can use cash or your credit card at a store and various things like that. That's really what we're talking about. It's getting more like that personalized transaction that has happened for millennia since people started organizing into society and actually invented money, where I hand you something of value and you hand me something back. And maybe it's only you and I who know that transaction happened.
Right. Yep.
So
I agree.
That's kind of where we're at. And what I bring up is that we have 57,000 people gathering in the ASEAN nation, which is the largest FinTech festival in the world. And FinTech, financial technology, underpins all of this, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, at the end of the day, Libra is a FinTech play by Facebook. Oh, you know what? We can't really monetize data this way anymore. We're still selling a bunch of ads out there. They're a big ad seller. Google, we talk about tracking. Google makes $132 billion a year in revenue by tracking us. $132 billion. And that whole ad tracking market was about $300 billion. That's what tracking is worth in revenue to these companies, right?
Right.
It's a big number. The data centralization, that's worth about, where we charge seat fees and license fees, that's worth about $390 billion a year. So we're talking about $750 billion a year in transaction fees that are all built in this current model. Well, companies, there's 57,000 people gathering in Singapore to figure out what's the next evolution of a cryptographic company and consensus. How is blockchain going to change those business models? That $3 trillion or $250 billion is not going to go away. It's going to shift. It's going to move into a new model because you know what, Dan? I am willing to pay for convenience. The world's willing to pay for convenience. We just want to know what we're paying for.
Correct. And to know that there's trust in the process.
That's right.
Yep, absolutely.
So, and this is an interesting part of the world. I put ASEAN in here because it's the Southeast Asia area of the world. And if you look at Southeast Asia, what you find out is it's a huge population. There's about 649 million people there. So roughly 2.5, 3 times the United States. And when you look at the overall penetration of media in the world, we're looking at about 7.5 billion people total population, and 2.9 billion people, about 3 billion people have mobile devices, which account for about $3 trillion or 4% of global GDP. So when we look at that, what's interesting about ASEAN is Singapore is a very, very advanced technological and infrastructure organization, as are some of the countries there. About half of that population doesn't even have a bank account, and many don't have an identity at all. But guess what they have?
Cell phones.
They have a mobile device. Yeah, they have cell phones.
Smartphones, yep.
So when we look at that, there's literally trillions of dollars around the world that are going to be consumed when we put these technologies on these mobile devices. So that kind of thing leads to this whole other layer of, well, do I need to be a cryptographic type company? And do I need that on my device? Look, all this hacking and stuff, it's just going to get bigger and more advanced as the world keeps connecting and keeps distributing its all of this information around the world. There's about 4 billion people that are actually connected to the internet right now. So there's still 3 billion people that aren't even connected to the internet. Right. So when we make this massive connection, we also need to make these massive strides in how we deal with this concept of data, and businesses need to make these massive strides quickly, because this is happening very quickly. And how do I go out now and get consensus for working with my organization and become that cryptographic company in the evolution? That's what blockchain does. It allows companies and organizations to continue to serve these great tools and these conveniences and these connections globally, and provide a new way to interact with customers, when the customer at the end of the day is the one who should hold the private key and lock or unlock their data.
Well, and Tim, just to put some perspective in terms of the internet and email, the internet turned over 25 years old this year, and email's over 30 years old. So, I mean, it's about time for a change in terms of technology. We've been utilizing technology, and of course, encryption has been around for a few years, but decentralization is the wave of the future, and what every company needs to be focused on. And we're even seeing new titles of executives like the data protection officer, and companies are trying to grapple with how to protect their consumers and their data. And this is
this is just the very beginning, Dan. Yep. Like these technologies have been around, and that's why I say it's about psychology, not technology. It's about understanding where the world's at. It's about understanding how we think today, how we have learned to think. And so at the end of the day, what this comes down to is this technology has been evolving, as you say, for over 30 years. Now we're going to get into things like where machines start telling us what to do if they haven't already. In a lot of cases, what we're doing when we're remarketing is we're encouraging, based on psychology, you to do this action. That's what Cambridge Analytica was all about, is they knew psychographically what was going on in populations, so then they could use that psychographic kind of groupthink power, which is a long time understood psychological modeling of crowds, and use technology to drive that. So as we get more and more towards big AI, big data, AI really running the show in how we're interacting with these machines as a society, we need to have more authentication of that data. That's why this all starts with blockchain. At the end of the day, blockchain authenticates who has control of the data. Is this a real individual? And at BlockCerts, we call that the 5 Ps. The person, the product, the place that this is happening, the process, and finally that payment. Correct. So if we have those 5 Ps unified, and Dan, you have the private key to those 5 Ps, you now have your comfort level psychologically that this is how I'm running my transactions, instead of another company saying, this is how you're going to run your transactions if you want to use our technology. Correct. So that's what we're talking about. The tech's been there and been evolved to a point that is very solid, it's very stable, it's very real, and we can use it. Now it's our responsibility to use it in a smart, responsible manner, because as we put this next layer on it, AI, we want to make sure it's artificial intelligence, not artificial ignorance.
Exactly. And, you know, obviously we're talking protection and security, but cost compression is a huge, huge benefit that most companies don't think about when they think about blockchain. And I don't want to get us off on another topic, but cost compression is a big thing that all of our clients that we work with.
Well, I think that we'll start bringing these things up in our next What's Next. That's what we call it, What's Next.
Right.
There's always going to be a What's Next, and that's why I love what we came up with as a name for the podcast. So if you ever want to know what's next, make sure you come back to the podcast. We're talking about these things. We're tracking the world for you, the listeners, and the people out there, of what's next with technology, blockchain, and how we're going to use this platform in the world as a society to really leverage the next level of technology and integration of people with AI, machine learning, and all those kinds of things. So what's next will be up next in our next podcast.
Absolutely. And if you have what's next? So if you have questions or topics that you'd like us to address, please contact us. You can go to blockcerts.com and just click on the contact us, and there's a form there. Just fill out the information. You can ask your questions, and we already have quite a few questions just from the last number of weeks to carry us forward. But we'll also be talking about what is happening, which is what's next. And for those who are interested in BlockCerts in terms of a company, certainly check us out there as well.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you for your time, everyone, and we'll look forward to talking about what's next in our next edition.
Absolutely. Have a good day. Bye.